It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Robin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us. A good weekend for a lot of Nigerians, especially if you're a sports fan, which a lot of Nigerians have become in the last couple of days because of the Super Eagles. Not a lot of cheering news around the country for a while now, so everybody's holding on to that one thing and hoping that the Super Eagles continue to go all the way. They beat Angola by a goal to nil on Friday, and we have our next game on Wednesday against South Africa. So we're keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that by the next time we're here in Robin Minds, we'll be talking about the finals, which will be holding next Sunday. But let's get into the show for the day. Nigeria is going through a lot, like I said. The economy is struggling, and the unemployment levels are beyond words. And a lot of people have tied that to the state of our education here in Nigeria. We're going to start the conversation today talking about education and what the possibilities are of starting to, fix that, whether it's short to medium term, but most importantly, long term. We're joined from our Abuja studios by Omolore Akinwolere. Thanks a lot for joining us. How are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing? Thanks a lot for joining us. Now, you are the founder of Lara Craft Toys and a director at Judy's Preparatory School, so you have sort of a hands-on idea of how things are going. There's a lot of conversation about, besides on the one hand, the number of out-of-school children, which is the highest in the world in Nigeria. There's also the talk about the quality for those who are even in school. And, we hear all of these stories about, employers talking about, trying to employ people or get people on jobs, and we hear all the stories about the qualifications not being as good as they used to be. How bad are things, especially at the foundational level? Because most people will tell you that, that's where things get set. The primary, and before you get to the tertiary level, a lot of, the soundness of the individual is already formed. What's your take on how things are right now?
Okay, yes, it's amazing you talked about education, because education is literally the core of everything we do. I have an early years and primary school called Judy's Preparatory School. So what we do is just to raise children, not just for the local environment, but for the international environment as well. So we make sure that we raise children from a stage where, as they're literally learning to talk, learning to walk, we're teaching them to do things the right way. Usually, when it comes to early years, a lot of people sometimes don't pay emphasis on that, but it's actually important for us, especially in the Nigerian environment as well, to raise children that are critical thinkers, because when we do that, these children grow up to ask the why questions. They don't see things and just leave them as they are. They ask the why questions, and when they do that, they're actually able to troubleshoot and help us solve so many problems, that we're currently facing. So at the school, we just make sure that we raise children that are critical thinkers and encourage them to be bold, speak up, and just help solve all the problems around as well.
Because there's a belief that for a lot of people, back in the day, even when primary education was free and was government run, the foundation was better than now when private institutions sort of have the bulk of, primary education, the population of primary education in their care. So is this an indictment on primary education, or is it an indictment on government, or is that even a fair analysis of things?
Well, as a private school owner, I know the things we go through on our end, trying to make sure that we produce children that will literally come up in the economy and just make things better. It's hard for a lot of private school owners because we're putting everything that we can. We get support from the government every now and then, but if we could actually get more support, the government, we know they can't do everything on their own. And as private school owners, we go the extra mile to train ourselves, to train the teachers that come into our care. Sometimes you get teachers that, yes, they've graduated with a BSc in education, or they have, an educational background, but it's still not up to standard of where we want things to be. So we have to retrain teachers, obviously to make sure that they're training children the right way as well. So yes, so we have to always retrain every time.
I'm very glad that you brought up the teacher conversation there, because I think that's been the biggest conversation around, public schools in particular. Because whether we like it or not, there can be so many private institutions, but these public schools will always hold the bulk of the Nigerian population because of the state of our economy, whether we like it or not. There's a lot of poverty in the land. Not everybody can afford to send their kids to those private schools. And a lot of conversation goes on around teacher quality. What can we start doing in that regard, especially as governments? Because yes, private institutions, on some level, there's some competition there, so people try to do better. But with the government institutions, what can we start to do to have that conversation around, having better teaching mechanics, if possible?
Okay, well, for a teacher to be able to pass on the education, they definitely need to know it themselves. First, it starts with how they're able to connect with the children in their care. It starts with, their level of understanding and the exposure they also have. You can't teach what you don't have, So for government to really be able to educate the teachers and the public sector, they also have to be aware of the surroundings. Pay attention to what really is the need of the children that these teachers are trying to teach. What's the exposure level of the teachers, and how can you also get private schools to help bring these public school teachers up? As a school owner myself, I always make sure that I constantly retrain myself. So with the way we grew up, we learned in different ways. Things have evolved since then. I constantly upgrade myself, not just with the educational materials around, but with the technological aspects as well. We have to keep up. We have to look at how technology can also act as enablers to make sure that whether you're in the private sector or you're in the public sector, you're actually up to date in terms of the curriculum and the delivery as well. So government needs to also look at how they can use technology as enablers to help teachers in the public sector. We can't reach everybody, but technology can be a bridge to making sure that the teachers in the public sector can also have access to what the private schools are using for delivery too.
So I want to talk about, what do you think? I mean, you run a preparatory school, so that's really young, right? And we've seen all of these statistics about the number of out-of-school children across the country. Is there really a point where it becomes, for want of a better phrase, too late to save people, to get back into the educational system? Is there an age where you feel like, because we live in Nigeria, we go around the streets, we see a lot of young men and women just sort of sitting idly. There's talks about that generation already being lost, because we have left it too late for them. How late is too late, to start fixing this education for young people?
Okay, it's never too late. No matter the age you are, no matter the children that are out there on the street, I would say it's never too late. And one thing we should always try to put into consideration is that children have different levels of knowledge, they have different skills. So whether they're too old or we feel that, they're young enough, we should actually try to tap into what the children's skills are, what their interests lie in. Not everybody will go down the academic route. So if they don't want to go down the academic route, how else can we make sure that they use their interests to become better citizens? So we have to tap into what the children like. They are never too old, and it's never too late for someone to learn something new.
Technology look like now, especially at that stage, the foundation stages, from let's say 3, 4, 5 years old till about early teens, when a lot of the formative years happen. What does technology look like, especially in a place like Nigeria where, we are not necessarily in the first world space? Affordability, access, what does it look like?
Okay, technology, whether we like it or not, is everywhere. So we have to keep up. And it's funny that children, especially from that age of 3, 4, 5, they are very, very conversant with technology. You give them a phone, a tablet, an iPad, they already know how to operate it without you necessarily guiding them. So imagine what now happens when you actually put them through and teach them the right things. I also like to teach my children ICT in school. I have a degree in information systems. So when I'm delivering teaching to these children, I don't look at it as, oh, they can't understand what I'm saying. I bring it down to their level. If it's in terms of coding, in terms of algorithm, whatever it is, I try to relate it to their daily activities, and that way they understand it better. And once they see that, okay, you know, I can use my knowledge of technology in so many other areas, then it makes learning easier for them. And even if the children are in a public school, I'm sure if they have access to technology, which is another thing, access for some children will be quite difficult when you compare it to the private schools. But government also needs to be able to look at what more can they help to do in terms of providing access. They don't have to provide 100 laptops to all the children at once, even if it's just like one interactive classroom or a VR headset or a laptop, just for them to at least be able to get that one access to the whole, to the international world, really.
Yeah, I know you're not an economist, but I just wanted to throw some things out there because UNESCO has a 15% sort of target for countries, you know, to allocate their budgets every year to education. Nigeria has never met that. I think our current 2024 budget is about 6.39% of the budget goes to education, which is about 1.54 trillion. Of that 1.54 trillion, we have less than 300 billion going to, you know, basic education. Does 300 billion look like it can tackle, you know, these issues? It might sound like a huge figure, but considering the constraints, you know, we see all these images of public schools. But before we even talk about the quality, infrastructure, you know, in these places, do you think we're ready to start that fight?
I don't think it's enough. You know, definitely, I feel a lot more can be allocated to that, considering the fact that we see some, you know, amounts being allocated to other areas. 300, I don't think it's enough, because we're talking about technology, for example. First, we need to look at the hardware and the software. We don't manufacture the laptops, the computers, the phones, the tablets. We need to be able to bring this in. And we all know how, you know, inflation is and the rising cost of dollars and things like that. So if we're allocating that, even just looking at the hardware alone, I don't think that would even be enough. And then when we're talking about software, we have to pay licenses and subscriptions. You know, these are things that we have to consider when we're creating that budget. So just allocating 300 to education, there's so many aspects of it. You know, you need to equip the classroom, you need to have the interactive whiteboards, you need to have, you know, the learning environment to be conducive enough. You know, so I think a lot more can be allocated to it. And at the end of the day, when we do allocate it, it's, you know, it's going to come back to benefit us. So why not just, you know, plant that in there for the future? We're not going to be here forever, so let's do what we can to make sure that the future looks good for the ones coming behind us.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for all the work you do. I mean, I always feel like people in the education sector and teachers in general never get celebrated enough. So thanks for everything you do, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to take a quick break now, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us.